talking about.
Yeah, I feel like coordinated letter campaigns would be good on those fronts, to like.
Yeah, I wish I had somebody I could tell you right now, but the director of inmates at the prison where I was teaching most recently um, very conspicuously quit in a hurry at one point, and it was really a heartbreaker to the prisoners and to myself and to a lot of other people at the prison. But she just kind of up and left pretty quickly, and under really, mysterious circumstances. Nobody really knew why, but it didn't seem to be good. And the new director of inmates that came was a lot different. Let's just put it that way. So yeah, it really a lot depends on the people in those positions. It seems to me.
Yeah. And that like one organization I feel like mentioning is Study and Struggle, which is a political education branch that works with Stevie Wilson, who's incarcerated in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a zine he puts out called In the Belly, and has been like, as far as I can tell, has been like one of the major like spokespeople on the recent wave of stimulus checks and things like
Mm-hmm.
that, in terms of getting information to people.
Oh, that's so huge. Yeah, I
I plan
shared
to
that.
write.
Yeah.
I plan to write to him, but I definitely sent a bunch of emails to. They were just like mass posting. Any official that might have any, say in getting these forms and instructions out to people, and like something like that, like we've seen like change in the wake of it. Like now, all of the facilities are being, they have to distribute the forms and information. Um,
Yeah, if they can be made to do that, and if they're just, it seems like everything might work better at the FCIs and SCIs because the prisoners usually have a lot more to do with how the details of the details of running the prison, or the prisoners themselves are involved in that a lot more than they are at the privatized county jails.
mm.
Um, but yeah, thanks. Also, I had another question also for Anthony or for both of you guys, I guess. But the one term that you used, I, I I I don't really understand what you mean when you say death by incarceration. Do you mean um, do you mean simply death sentences, or do you mean
Life without
destroying the
life
mind and
without
the
parole.
body by prolonged solitary confinement, or what
Life,
does that mean exactly?
it means life without parole. Life without the
Life without
possibility of parole.
simple as that. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, currently, in Pennsylvania, there are hundreds of, people serving life without parole sentences in, facilities all over the state. And I'm just, from my own experience.
Mhm.
And, you know, we're talking about some of them being, and I know that some of the laws have changed, especially for the folks that were juveniles when they were incarcerated. But I mean, just in my own travels, I've met people who were 35, 40 years in prison since they were 16, 17 years old, with no possibility of ever going home because of something that, happened when they were a child.
Right.
Or, just uh, just think about like what kind of damage that does to a human being, a human soul, a human psyche. The trauma that is lived through understanding that every single day you're going to be hearing those cell doors slam for
Right.
for the rest of your life, and not having any hope to get any quality health care, having to eat meals that are
Yeah.
rations, who can feed you the cheapest. I mean, it's just, I'm just like, just in those circumstances, and those are just your physical, that doesn't even go into all of the mental and emotional aspects of like what it takes to even serve time period. And I don't want to like take up too much time here, but like, the serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole is just like um, a really traumatic way to snatch hope from the grips.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand you why you'd use that term for it. I just wanted to make sure I was getting it right about what you meant.
Yeah,
Um,
and I didn't make that term up. That was Cadvi that did that, and I'm honestly just grateful that sometimes I get to participate in their work.
yeah, thank you, by the way. But yeah, what Ken said about, just trying to get books into Northampton County Jail. Um, yeah, I'm sure you know, Anthony, how right on that was. It's so hard to get even a piece of candy to somebody in prison. Um, so books or insofar as letters are, these pieces of literature that they that the guards are always going to raise an eyebrow to any letter that comes in, especially if they have any uncertainties about what it might contain. Um, not just, and I would even say that it's not just about the material that might be in there, such as drugs, but also the content of the letters themselves. They get censored a lot. They get read and then put back in the envelopes a lot. They redacted even. Um, and it all depends. Every situation's different. Um, every guard is different. Every instance of a letter trying to be sent to a prisoner is different. But friends I've had in prison have told me that they one of the best things they could get, one of the best things that could happen to them would be if they were allowed to work in the mailroom, because they would be able to actually get letters to people uncensored. You know. Anyway, I don't want to talk too much.
I also wanted to mention, as I'm really thinking about, and Mike, I'm glad you're here. I think you might be the only other faculty member here. Is that true? Are there any other faculty members in the house at Northampton? Well,
I'm on my phone, so I can't.
Yeah, no, that's okay. But what I was thinking was, I'm teaching a chapter from this really intriguing book by Lynn Hunt called Inventing Human Rights, A History. It came out just a few years ago, and basically the thesis that she's sort of trying to figure out where, like, her basic argument is that one of the main reasons why we have so many crises we do is that we have in the modern world all of our moral discussions about justice, about oppression, is all framed around this concept of rights. We're always, and that is not historically true. But there's a lot of institutions that were created a few hundred years ago. Modern democracies are created right around the same time that incarceration is created. It's around the same time that capitalism is created, wage labor is created, and this concept of rights is invented. And so
it's a product of the Enlightenment.
Yeah, and so she's trying to figure out where exactly does it, part of her idea is that one of the reasons why we get into such impasses is that we all believe in rights, and you have people on the right shout on the right, shouting like, "What about rights? What about my rights?" And then people on the left shouting, "What about rights? What about rights?" And for her, the problem is that we both kind of have a point, and the problem is that it's a really deeply ambiguous and not particularly well developed philosophical concept. But here's my point. So the question is, like, why did it take off? If you think about the Declaration of Independence, you have these rights are God-given, but it's like, where exactly do rights come from? When we're trying to figure out what rights prisoners have, what rights immigrants have, it's sort of like, well, what exactly do we mean by rights in the first place? What does it mean to have a right? What exactly is a right? And she says, she points out that the argument that she makes is that actually the origin of rights is not so much this well-defined philosophical or theological concept. It never was that. but it was a way of trying to deal with this incredible emotional upheaval that was happening for people in the 1700s because of a very specific, unique, historically unique literary form, which was the epistolary novel. And she makes the case that something very strange happens to the reader when they're reading an epistolary novel. Novels were not an old form, and epistolary novels in particular. But anybody from the founding fathers to Rousseau, the founding fathers in the United States, as well as the founding fathers of the Enlightenment, were all completely obsessed with epistolary novels. And she talks about even sort of like
And can you explain what an epistolary novel is to
a novel that
even this writer who's not clear?
No,
it comes in the form of letters.
Just letters. I'm sorry, letters being written back and forth.
Like Bram Stoker's Dracula, or if you think of Robinson Crusoe, there's a travel log. It's not letters, but it comes in little pieces. But they're usually published serially. Books like Henry Fielding's Tom Jones.
But this is specifically when it's a letter, like dear blah blah blah, and then what you're reading is a letter. And what she makes the case that something very unique happens to the reader, even neurologically, where it's like, who do I identify with exactly? And on the one hand, I'm Ken reading a book. On the other hand, I'm also identifying with the person who wrote this letter. I'm also identifying with the person who reads the letter, to whom the letter was written. And so there's these multiple layers of identification that are happening, which in her perspective actually created an entirely new subjectivity. And she talks in this interview about how if you look at the brain scan of somebody who's reading an epistolary novel, their brains are lighting up all over the place. She's one point in this interview, she says something like, it's as though all of those, there was like the real explosion that was happening. It looks like an explosion that was happening in people's brains. And so that created this kind of moment of empathy where I was like really deeply empathizing with somebody else. And people were like going into like fits of passion and sort of like they have to do something. And that is, in her argument, was like what led to we have to fight for people's rights. And these people are being horribly oppressed and I can't stand it anymore. But it all came from the epistolary novel. And so I would love to teach that text, teach a chapter from that book on the epistolary novel, and have students writing letters with political prisoners. If her argument is true, that really created this incredible passion, she was like, rights were never an intellectual affair. It was never sort of like a well-reasoned, syllogistic, logical argument for why exactly people have rights, which is why it never works to debate logically across ideological divides, because ultimately what the whole paradigm isn't grounded in logic, it's grounded in passion and empathy, which specifically grows out of the epistolary form. So I'm very excited about the idea of working with you all and developing some sort of a unit and a class where we're really investigating the experience of empathy and letter writing.
Yeah, I feel like posing the idea that what you're saying as rights as never being this thing that were written down, like those are the laws, right? Those are the laws decided in that moment of historical upheaval based on like new understandings of collective right. Just to say that what I think is so inspiring and interesting about the MOVE organization is that they just called out the American project explicitly and fought it in a court of law. And like that sort of like strategy and logic was unacceptable, because, instead of like arguing like we're doing now about like which version of like some like crackpot half understood idea of freedom is fought, you can skip the entire contradiction and jump to like what these quotes of the MOVE members are, which is like this: when we believe in natural law, the government of self, man-made laws are not really laws because they don't apply equally to everyone. They contain exceptions and loopholes, and they're saying that you fight the same court of law anywhere you go, which is natural law. And, you know, think of like the announcement by the police commissioner when he says, "Attention, MOVE, this is America, like you can't act this way." It's like, how is that not in direct contradiction to like any sort of like written down definition of like their right? You know, they believe in the right to property, the right to own weapons, this and that, you know, and it was just systematically shut down. And so I think I sort of want to raise the question of like that as it relates to like sociality, that we get socialized into like taking this as the law, you know, and understanding it as such. And that maybe like I've been thinking a lot about how like maybe the thing that goes against that is a sort of anti-sociality, like a collective understanding that like we aren't going to judge people, you know, that in a lot of way. And I think that like abstracted art or art in general is a lens through which to like understand that idea, which is that artists are fucking weird. And when you write a letter, when you sit there in your room by yourself writing, you're going crazy. Your brain's firing off like that, you know? And you're gonna, if you're doing it right, you're gonna make 100,000 things that no one will ever understand, right? And they're all on these pieces of paper that might get discovered in years or might not, you know? Maybe you never considered yourself an artist and you just work your whole life, you know? And just that all of these things, and that to like break down what is generally acceptable to an American public, which at this point we're seeing to be like ignoramuses, like that just want to like spit their like virus infected goo all over each other, like outside the president, like bowing to the president, like outside of his hospital room after like I feel like that like sort of neoliberal thing that happened where they all were like, we're praying for him all of a sudden, like after they've been citing how many people he's responsible for in a cultural genocide. Like why not just call it out explicitly?
It's a weird year for sure.
Yeah. Hey, Ken, what's the title of that book by Lynn Hunt?
Inventing Human Rights.
Invented Human Rights.
Inventing
Thank you.
Human Rights. Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right, Pat, about how, you know, I mean, to pull the idea that Ken was talking about and that Lynn Hunt is talking about in her book into the present. I mean, a lot of what is getting said and thought in America today is really just more expression of the anxiety about the concept of identity that was already there, you know, in the European Enlightenment, you know, out of which the epistolary novel grew, and you know, according to Lynn Hunt, if I'm getting it right, really exacerbated people's anxieties about their identities. And I mean, for example, you know, a lot of those epistolary novels were written from the point of view of a young woman, but they were written by, you know, some middle-aged man somewhere, and people read those understanding that it's written, something written by Samuel Richardson, who's, you know, in his 50s or something, but it's the voice of a 16-year-old girl summering in the mountains and writing back to her grandmother about the interesting young field hand who she just met. And you know, I guess when people read that back in those days, it really kind of was jarring almost. Anyway, my real point was that, yeah, there's a lot of paranoia and anxiety, people feeling like they really need to struggle for their identities and reassert them somehow forcefully, or they're not going to exist anymore. It's a lot of paranoia. That's all.
And so I think supporting like these traditions that just affirm time and time again, like what we all like, a really strong idea of freedom, you know?
Patrick, in the short amount of time that we have left, is there any way? Is there anything that's that you want to summarize or still present that's really important to folks engaging with the project that you're currently working on?
I think that maybe like this slide, which is just a collection of like a ton of other really good organizations doing similar writing projects, art projects, getting books to people, and yeah, I would just say like read their stories and write something, you know, and do a couple drafts and you know learn something new about yourself and about someone else. And yeah, that's probably what I would say.
Awesome. Yeah, and is just going to, can you put your website in the chat so that folks can also record how to interact with you and your organization and how to participate in the projects that you're working on?
Cool.
And I'll also currently put DSA's Lehigh Valley DSA's Facebook is DSA of the Lehigh Valley, and on Twitter we're at DSA Lehigh Valley. You know, please give a follow. Check into the kind of work we don't just do, you know, abolition work, but we do also do abolition work. And I see that Patrick, you've put yours in there too.
Yeah, that's the website and the Instagram.
And I'm also
Just say thanks to both of you guys, Anthony and Patrick. I'm gonna have to jump off now.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to.
See you later.
We're gonna wrap this session up. It's about time. But
I also, real quick, Ken, I also put the Coalition to Abolish Death by Incarceration's name of their Facebook page in there too.
Thank you.
So if anybody wants to look into that.
Thank you so much. Anthony, thank you so much for being such an awesome moderator. Patrick, thank you so much for being such an awesome human being and for sharing your project with us. I know
we have that question though, Ken. What can the NCC community, students, faculty, and administration do to support the work that you brought here today? Real quick before Ken
bring it.
tips us off. I apologize to interrupt you, Ken.
I think we should start a political education study group. That's all I got, and that the connections can be made to the Northampton County Prison.
Great.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
Thank you. I have to say, it's pretty much everybody has answered that question so far with curriculum.
Yeah.
You know, we're a school, but what are we teaching? Are we teaching the support and justification of the status quo, or are we teaching revolution and abolition? So thank you for reinforcing that vision.
And everyone that wants to organize on that front, let's all stay in touch. Just email the website and we'll exchange info.
Yeah, rock on. Thank you to everybody for coming. And Nisa, thank you so much for your contribution. And thanks to everybody. I hope you stick around. Up next is at 9:30. We have got what is next? We have so this will be really great. I mean, I really hope that people can stick around. At 9:30 is the panel on a police-free future featuring Ashley Strange from Lehigh Valley Stands Up and Peter Van Kudenet from Minneapolis Police Department 150. So that should be really incredible, not to be missed. I hope to see you all there. All right, thanks everybody. Thank you again, Anthony, so much. Thank you, Patrick, so much. We did it. And everybody can go take a break.
Peace, everybody. Peace and love. Solidarity.
Hey, Glenn.